carried something unnatural that night, something more than the cold that crawled beneath the skin. It carried a smile, not the kind drawn gently across someone's lips, but the kind you sensed an invisible curve stretching through the darkness. Watching, waiting, Emily Walker felt it before she saw anything, a subtle pressure in the air, like the world had suddenly leaned closer to her, whispering without breath. It was the same presence she had encountered years ago as a child, the same chilling scares that haunted her dreams and followed her every winter night. She stood alone on the porch of her family's old cabin, deep in the pine-buried mountains of Oregon. The sky was moonless, swallowed by a sheet of motionless clouds. The only sound was the wind brushing through tree needles like skeletal fingers combing through brittle hair. Emily hugged her coat tighter, though the cold wasn't what bothered her. It was the feeling that the night recognized her, that it remembered her. For the last 3 nights, she had heard the same noise, a faint hum drifting through the forest, rising and falling like someone exhaling a laugh far away. But tonight was different. Tonight, the hum came closer, clearer, intentional. She stepped back toward the door, but before she could turn the knob, a soft whisper skimmed her ear. "Emily." She froze, every muscle in her body locked in place. Her heart thudded painfully, loud enough she feared it might draw whatever called her name. Slowly, she turned her head toward the tree line. The shadows swayed, bending unnaturally out of sync with the wind, as if something moved among them. Something tall, something smiling. "This can't be real," she told herself. "It has to be the wind, just the wind." But the wind didn't speak with familiarity. The wind didn't drag her childhood nightmares back into the present. The wind didn't remember her name. The memory struck her with the force of a blow the night she was 10 years old, standing outside this same cabin, hearing that same whisper. That night, she had seen eyes glowing faintly between the trees, and a curved slit of white, stretching wider and wider, like a painted grin detached from a face. Her parents never believed her. They said she dreamed it, imagined it, but Emily never forgot the way the smile widened when their eyes met. She never forgot the way the wind changed direction, circling her like a predator tasting its prey. Tonight, the air shifted again. Emily stepped backward until her back touched the door. The porch light flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging her into complete darkness. Her breath trembled out of her throat. No, not now, not again. She forced her hand behind her, fumbling for the door handle, but before her fingers reached it, a low sound rolled from the forest, a slow, rising hum, almost a giggle echoing between the trees. The smile was back, not imagined, not forgotten, real, and it had found her again. Emily bolted inside, slamming the door shut. She pressed her back against it, breathing hard, her pulse pounding in her temples. The cabin felt smaller than she remembered, as if the walls were creeping closer, shrinking with every heartbeat. She grabbed her phone. No signal, not a single bar. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the wood, but beneath it, Emily heard something else. A faint tapping along the porch floorboards, slow, rhythmic, like footsteps pacing back and forth. Step, step, step. Her blood ran cold. It was waiting, just like before. Emily gripped her phone harder. I need to stay calm. Think, don't let it in. But when she turned toward the window, her breath caught in her throat. Through the frosted glass, a shape stood motionless, not fully visible, just the outline of something tall. Impossibly tall. The faint curvature of a grin stretched wider than a human mouth should ever be able to. Her legs nearly gave out. It's real. God, it's real. The smile didn't move, didn't blink, just stared into the cabin. Its presence heavier than the darkness around it. The wind blew again, swirling around the cabin, carrying a soft murmur that crawled beneath Emily's skin. Emily, I found you. The voice slithered into her ears like icy water. She clamped her hands over them, her heartbeat frantic. No, please. The grin outside widened. The wind hissed, and Emily realized something horrifying. The smile wasn't in the forest anymore. It was standing right outside her window, waiting for her to open the door, waiting to come inside. Emily staggered backward from the window, her breath trapped in her throat, her body locked between terror and disbelief. The grin outside the glass didn't press closer or fog the window with breath. It simply existed still, sharp and impossible, like a wound carved into the night itself, an outline that was somehow both faint and blinding, a smile that seemed to stretch beyond the edges of what her mind could contain. She grabbed the nearest lamp and flicked the switch. Nothing. The power was gone. The darkness inside the cabin grew heavier, thick enough that Emily felt it crawling up her spine, seeping into her lungs with each breath she took. She fumbled along the wall until her fingers found the flashlight mounted near the door. She clicked it on. A weak cone of yellow light flickered to life. She aimed it at the window. The smile vanished. Emily froze. The air around her stilled, as if the entire cabin inhaled and refused to exhale. Okay, she whispered, voice trembling. It's gone. It's gone. I'm just imagining things. It's the dark. The dark makes shapes. That's all. A sharp knock hit the window. 3 knocks. Slow. Intentional. Emily's legs buckled, and she collapsed onto her knees, the flashlight beam shaking wildly in her hand. Her pulse echoed the knocks, pounding violently against her ribs, as if trying to break free from her chest. No, that wasn't real. That wasn't. The knocks came again, this time on the opposite window. 3 knocks, rhythmic, friendly, like someone asking politely to be let inside. Emily crawled backward until she reached the sofa, pulling herself upright. Her hands shook uncontrollably, her throat constricted with the memory of those knocks 10 years ago. The same number, the same slowness, the same patience. Emily, let me in. No, she whispered hoarsely. No, you're not real. You're a nightmare. I outgrew you. I outgrew all of this. The wind howled against the cabin, swirling around the corners like something circling prey. Then the floorboards of the porch creaked. Step, step, step. Emily's breath caught. Whatever was outside wasn't walking like a person. The weight of each step was off too heavy, then suddenly too light. like it didn't understand gravity, like it was learning how to mimic footsteps each time its foot touched the wood. She pointed her flashlight at the window again. The beam shook, and then a shape leaned forward into the edge of the light, not fully formed, not flesh, not smoke, a silhouette of darkness denser than the night around it, tall enough that it filled the entire window frame. Its shoulders were narrow, its limbs too long, as if stretched by unseen hands. The grin was there again, white and curved like a crescent moon carved from bone. Emily clamped her hand over her mouth to suppress a scream. The grin opened, not like a mouth, but like a cracking fissure in the world. A whisper poured through the glass. "You locked me out last time, Emily." Her body froze. Her childhood memory slammed into her. She was 10 years old, alone in the cabin. The wind had laughed. The smile had waited outside, and her mother found her hours later, curled beneath the kitchen table, trembling violently, unable to speak. She had locked the door, and the smile never forgave her. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. Emily jerked toward the door, her heart lodging in her throat. The knob shook again gently, almost politely, as if someone was trying not to scare her. Then a voice, soft, calm, terrifyingly familiar. "Emily, open the door. I can't get in unless you let me." She slapped both hands over her ears. "Stop! Stop talking." But the voice slid under her palms, weaving directly into her thoughts. "Just open the door. You know I've waited long enough." Emily stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of books. She crawled across the floor, grabbed her phone, and punched in her brother's number. No signal, no Wi-Fi, nothing but a black screen and the reflection of her own terrified face staring back at her, her vision blurred with tears. Think, Emily, there has to be something you can do." Her father had once mentioned that the cabin had a backup power unit in the basement, a generator he rarely used. Maybe she could start it, restore the lights, chase away whatever clung to the darkness. She clutched the flashlight. "I have to make it to the basement," she whispered. Another knock, this time louder. Then a chuckle, a deep, breathless giggle that scraped across the wood like claws. Emily swallowed the scream clawing at her throat and ran for the hallway. The cabin groaned as she sprinted past closed doors, her footsteps pounding across the old wooden floor. The hallway seemed longer than she remembered, as though the darkness stretched it while she ran. Her flashlight flickered with every step. She reached the basement door and grabbed the handle. Behind her, the knocking stopped. Total silence. Her heart stalled. She slowly turned her head. The smile was standing at the end of the hallway, not outside, not behind glass, inside the cabin. Its tall, distorted form barely fit beneath the ceiling. Its grin glowed like a curved blade carved into a world without light. Its limbs didn't move. They swayed, floating slightly above the floorboards. Emily gasped and stumbled backward, slamming into the basement door. The grin widened. "You opened the door for me, Emily." Her blood froze. I didn't. The smile leaned forward, stretching taller, head tilting to the side with a sickening crack. You opened it when you let me remember you. The flashlight flickered wildly in her hand. No, please stay away. The smile drifted toward her, long fingers dragging across the walls, leaving faint, black streaks like burned shadows. Emily fumbled for the door handle behind her, desperate, nails scraping the wood. It opened. She fell backward into darkness, tumbling down the basement steps. Pain shot through her body as she rolled and crashed into cold concrete. Her flashlight skidded across the floor, stopping near the old generator. Emily pushed up onto her elbows, vision blurry, ears ringing. The basement door at the top of the stairs creaked open, slowly, painfully. The smile peeked down the staircase. Watching her, waiting, Emily scrambled toward the generator. Her hands shook violently as she tried to memorize her father's instructions. Fuel, switch, ignition. She ripped off the cover, flipped the emergency valve, and slammed her hand against the starter. The generator coughed. Failed. She hit it again. The creature at the top of the stairs giggled a wet, breathless sound that dripped into the darkness like melting wax. Emily slapped the starter again. The lights flickered. The smile froze. Emily hit the button one last time. The generator roared to life. Light flooded the basement. Harsh, buzzing, blinding. The smile recoiled violently, its body twisting, glitching in spasms of shadow. Its grin dimmed, its form stuttering like a corrupted projection. Emily stumbled to her feet. The smile hissed, not in anger, in fear. Emily, why would you bring the light back? She backed away slowly, her breaths ragged. Because you can't stay where the light is, she whispered. The smile shrank into the shadows above the stairs, retreating just beyond the reach of the basement light, hovering, distorted, trembling. But the wind will blow again, Emily, and when the lights fail, you will smile with me. Emily gripped the edge of the generator, her heart hammering. The shadow inched back into the darkness, watching, waiting. The smile faded, but the wind began to stir. The night wasn't over. Emily didn't remember how long she stood frozen by the window, staring at the vague silhouette lurking outside. Time moved strangely inside the cabin, as if the moment stretched, tightened, and wrapped around her like invisible hands. The tapping on the porch continued, slow and patient, as though whatever waited outside enjoyed the growing terror inside her chest. When she finally tore herself away, she stumbled back into the living room, gripping the edge of an old wooden table for balance. Everything inside the cabin felt wrong. The pictures on the walls seemed slightly crooked, the shadows deeper than they should be, the silence thick enough to swallow her breaths. It was as if the presence outside had seeped through the cracks in the wood, contaminating the air. Her phone remained useless. No signal, no way to call for help. But she wasn't completely alone, not yet. Her older brother, Daniel Walker, was somewhere on the mountain, hiking the northern trail with two friends from work. They were supposed to return by dawn. Emily prayed they were close. She prayed they were safe. She prayed they hadn't encountered the smile. She grabbed a flashlight, though her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. Stay calm, stay focused. Don't let it inside. But a voice inside her whispered, "It's already inside." The cabin creaked as though something heavy leaned against the exterior wall. Emily spun around, heart slamming against her ribs. The sound slithered across the boards, sliding from one corner of the cabin to the other. Thump, thump, thump. Like fingers drumming playfully. She backed up until her knees hit the edge of the sofa. The smile outside the window hadn't moved. But the tapping now, it was coming from the opposite side of the cabin. That shouldn't be possible, unless there was more than one, or unless the smile could move faster than she could blink. Her breath caught in her throat. What if it wasn't a person at all? What if it never was? A faint whisper drifted through the cracks of the window, soft, stretched, melodic in a way that made the hair on her arms stand straight. "Emily, do you remember me?" Her stomach twisted. She remembered too well. When she was 10, she didn't just see the smile. She heard it, whispering to her in the same way it whispered now, calling her name like it had been waiting for her all along. But back then, the voice only came once, before her father found her shivering outside. Tonight, the voice returned with purpose. The wind howled violently, rattling the windows, but beneath the storm's roar was something more unsettling. Laughter, not human laughter. A long, breathy giggle that slid along the wind like a razor blade wrapped in silk. Emily clapped her hands over her ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, vibrating through her skull. "Stop," she whispered, squeezing her eyes shut. "Please stop." But the laughter only grew clearer, as if entering her head instead of her ears. She lurched forward, nearly tripping as she ran toward the fireplace. The old cast-iron poker leaned against the bricks. She seized it with both hands, the metal icy cold. It wasn't much, but it was something to remind herself she wasn't powerless. The cabin suddenly fell silent. The laughter ended instantly, cut off like someone pressed a mute button. The abrupt silence was worse. Emily felt her heartbeat echo through her bones. She raised the fireplace poker in front of her, inching toward the hallway. Then 3 slow knocks echoed through the cabin, but this time they didn't come from the window. They came from the back door. Emily's blood iced over. No one ever used that door. It faced the ravine. There were no stairs, no walkway, no reason for anyone to stand behind the cabin unless something wasn't walking. The knock came again, this time softer, almost playful. Her pulse thrashed wildly, but she forced herself forward. Step by trembling step, she moved down the hallway, her flashlight beam shaking against the walls. Dust filmed the old paintings. The floorboards moaned beneath her feet. As she approached the back door, she heard breathing, not hers, slow, ragged. Too close. Emily lifted the poker higher, sweat chilling her palms. She reached the door. Silence. She swallowed hard. Maybe it's gone. Then the whisper seeped through the wood, low and stretched like a smile made of sound. "Let me see you, Emily." Oh. Her vision blurred. She stumbled back, hitting the hallway wall. The doorknob began to turn. No force on earth could have moved Emily at that moment. Terror glued her in place. The brass knob rattled, twisting left, right, little by little. Something on the other side tested the door, as if it knew exactly how fragile her sanity was. Then, the turning stopped. Silence. Again. Emily didn't dare breathe. Slowly, she raised her flashlight toward the peephole in the door, expecting to see darkness. But she didn't see darkness. She saw a smile, horizontal, too wide, pressed directly against the glass like the curve of a crescent moon carved into flesh. Her scream never left her throat. She dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the floor. The smile didn't move, didn't blink, didn't fade. It simply waited. The wind outside hissed. The footsteps returned to the porch, and Emily realized something far more horrifying. The smile wasn't trying to get inside the cabin. It wanted her to come out. Emily stumbled backward until her shoulders struck the hallway wall, the impact rattling through her bones. The smile at the peephole remained perfectly still, as though etched into the glass. It didn't fog. It didn't shift. It simply curved upward in a grotesque arc, wider than a human mouth should ever be. The longer she stared at it, the more she felt the air around her thicken, pressing against her skin like a cold, invisible hand. Her flashlight rolled across the wooden floor, casting frantic, spinning shadows along the walls. For a moment, she considered snatching it up and running to her bedroom, hiding under the bed like she did when she was a child. But she wasn't sure hiding would matter. The presence outside didn't feel like something that could be escaped. It felt like something that always knew exactly where she was. The wind howled outside, rattling loose boards and whistling through the cracks in the cabin's frame. But underneath the storm's roar, Emily heard a soft tapping on the window at the end of the hall. Tap, tap, tap. Every inch of her body tensed. The front porch, the back door, now the hallway window. Was it surrounding the cabin? Or was there more than one? No, it can't be more than one, she thought desperately. It's the same thing, the same one from before, the same one from when I was a child. Her breath trembled as she forced herself toward the end of the hall. The fireplace poker held out in front of her like a flimsy shield. She didn't want to look out the window. In fact, every nerve in her body screamed at her not to, but the tapping continued, steady and deliberate, demanding attention. Tap, tap, tap. Emily's pulse thundered as she reached the window. She lifted her gaze slowly, bracing herself for the silhouette. The eyes, the impossible grin. But there was nothing, only darkness, a void of black stretching across the forest. The tapping stopped the second her eyes met the window. Emily exhaled shakily, relief flooding through her chest like warm water. Then the window breathed. A long, cold exhale fogged the glass from the outside right in front of her face. Emily screamed and stumbled backward, the poker clattering against the floor. She slipped on the rug, crashing onto her hands and knees. When she looked back up, she saw it not a figure, not a shadow, but that same sickening smile stretching across the entire window pane. It wasn't attached to a face. It wasn't connected to a body. It simply floated, glowing faintly, like something carved from pale fire. The smile twitched. Emily scrambled backward across the floor, her palms burning as she pushed herself away. The window vibrated as something pressed against it from outside, not pounding, not forcing its way in, just brushing against it. like fingertips drawing shapes on a fogged mirror. A slow oval, a curve, a crooked line, a face that wasn't human. No. Emily gasped as she finally reached the living room again, her heartbeat uncontrollable. The lights in the cabin flickered once, twice, then the entire room dimmed until only the fire's faint embers lit the space. Shadows slithered across the wooden walls. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something colder like the breath of winter. Emily grabbed her backpack from the coffee table. She didn't know where she would go, but staying inside the cabin felt like waiting to die. She stuffed the flashlight inside, along with the map, a bottle of water, and a pocket knife she prayed she wouldn't have to use. Then a loud creak echoed from the porch, as though something enormous stepped onto the wooden boards. Emily froze. The footsteps were slow, calculated, heavy enough to make dust fall from the rafters. Thump, thump, thump. They moved toward the front door. Stopped. Silence. Emily's chest tightened painfully. She took one step back, only one, before the door handle twisted sharply, violently, rattling as if something yanked it with inhuman strength. The entire doorframe shuddered. Wood splintered. Emily darted behind the sofa, pressing herself into the narrow space between the furniture and the wall. She held her breath so long her lungs felt like they might burst. The handle rattled again, then slowly released. A whisper floated through the cracks. Emily, I can see you. Tears spilled down her cheeks in silent streaks. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Across the room, the front window darkened. Something was standing directly outside, a faint outline, a long shadow, a smile stretching wider with every passing second. Emily could feel it watching her through the glass, its attention sharp enough to cut. For the first time in her life, she realized a dreadful truth. This wasn't just a haunting. This thing wasn't randomly tormenting her. It had come back for her specifically. It had waited years. It had followed her, and now it wanted her. Emily stayed wedged behind the sofa, every muscle locked, her breath barely a whisper slipping between trembling lips. The grin outside the window remained rigid and impossibly wide, suspended in the darkness like a wound torn into the night itself. She didn't dare lift her head higher than the armrest, terrified that the slightest movement would snap the creature's attention toward her like a wolf sensing prey. The fire in the hearth sputtered, then died with a soft hiss, plunging the cabin into a deeper, suffocating darkness. The sudden cold seemed to crawl along the floor, creeping up her arms like an icy tide. Emily wrapped her shaking hands around her shoulders, trying to steady her breath. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that carried intent, the kind that listened. For several agonizing minutes, the shadow outside didn't move. Only the grin stayed hovering, glowing faintly, like a pale crescent smear across the window. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, praying the nightmare might end if she refused to look at it. But the cabin itself seemed to pulse around her, as though the walls were breathing. In, out. in, out. The wood creaked rhythmically, stretching and tightening like sinew. Emily felt her stomach twist. No house should breathe, no structure should feel alive, and yet the cabin exhaled warm, fetid air slipping through cracks, drifting across her skin like fingers. A whisper broke the silence, so close it felt like it came from inside her own mind. "Emily, you're not alone." Her heart seized painfully. "Stop!" she rasped under her breath. "Stop talking to me." The whisper circled her again, as though the voice drifted through the air, searching the room for her exact position. "I've waited so long. Don't hide from me." Emily's vision blurred as tears welled up again. She pressed both hands over her mouth to stop the sob threatening to escape. Every trembling exhale felt too loud. Then, footsteps. Except this time they weren't outside. They were inside the cabin. Slow, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. Emily's blood iced. Her mind screamed that she had not heard the door open, but the weight of the footsteps was unmistakable. Something walked across the wooden floor, scraping lightly with each step as though dragging long, sharp limbs. It moved from the kitchen to the hallway, then from the hallway toward her. No, 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 no. Emily pressed herself deeper into the narrow space behind the sofa, her back scraping the wall. She glanced toward the fireplace poker lying a few feet away, dropped earlier in her panic. She could crawl to it maybe, but moving meant noise. Noise meant death. The footsteps stopped right behind the sofa. Emily clenched her teeth to silence her breath. Her chest burned as she forced herself not to inhale, not to exhale, not to tremble. The creature didn't move, didn't breathe, but a faint sound reached her so quiet it felt like a cold fingertip tracing the inside of her skull. A giggle, a small, childish laugh, twisted and broken, bubbling up from something that wasn't human. Emily's vision darkened at the edges. Panic suffocated her throat like a fist. She felt something press lightly against the fabric of the sofa, like the weight of a hand settling there. Then the hand dragged downward, slow, deliberate. Claws long and uneven scraped along the cushion, slicing threads loose. Fibers fluttered into the air like dust. The sound traveled down the length of the sofa until the claws reached the bottom corner. Inches from Emily's face. Her stomach lurched. She choked back a scream. The hand stopped. A silence so complete fell over the room that Emily almost believed the creature had vanished. But then, from the other side of the sofa, something leaned low enough for a shape to cast a shadow over the floor in front of her. A tall, grotesquely slender outline, its limbs bending at unnatural angles, as though no bone in its body belonged where it was placed. The shadow moved, slowly, deliberately. It tilted its head, and the smile appeared above the couch, glowing faintly like the moon rising over a horizon. Emily swallowed a gasp, her lungs screaming for air. She couldn't stay here. She would suffocate or it would take her. She had one chance. With a burst of desperate courage, Emily lunged for the fireplace poker. The metal clanged loudly against the floor the moment her fingers closed around it. The creature reacted instantly. A guttural hiss erupted sharp, cold and violent as the shadow lurched upward. Its elongated form towered over the sofa, the smile widening to impossible lengths. Emily scrambled to her feet and sprinted toward the front door. The cabin shook. With a thunderous crack, something slammed into the wall behind her, hard enough to rattle the floorboards. Emily grabbed the door handle and twisted wildly. The lock jammed. She twisted harder, her breath shredding in her throat. The footsteps lunged behind her. Something scraped across the wooden floor like claws, firing sparks. "No, please," she cried. The lock finally snapped open. She yanked the door wide, and a wall of freezing wind blasted into her face. The forest stood before her, pitch black and swaying violently, but Emily didn't hesitate. She bolted into the night, her feet pounding through the dirt, branches whipping against her arms. Behind her, from the doorway of the cabin, the creature's whisper followed. "Run, Emily. I love when you run." Branches whipped at Emily's arms and face as she sprinted deeper into the forest, each step sinking into damp earth. Her breath tore from her lungs in ragged bursts, white in the freezing night air. She didn't dare look back, not when she could still hear the creature's distorted whisper drifting behind her like smoke. "Run, Emily. Don't stop." The voice slithered through the trees, moving unnaturally fast, weaving between the pines like it was riding the wind itself. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, but fear propelled her forward in blind desperation. The forest was a jagged maze of shadows, each trunk stretching upward like the ribs of some ancient, dead beast. The ground dipped suddenly, and Emily stumbled, crashing to her knees. A sharp pain shot up her leg. She bit back a cry, pushing herself upright, clutching her thigh. She couldn't stop not here, not when she could feel the cold presence closing in behind her. The wind changed direction. It carried laughter, a long, low, warped giggle that echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emily forced herself to keep running, weaving between the towering trees until the cabin vanished completely behind her. The darkness swallowed everything. No moon, no stars, nothing but the faint glow of her dying flashlight, bouncing wildly with each desperate stride. Her mind raced. Where can I go? Where can I hide? There's nothing out here. Nothing but trees. Nothing but shadows. Nothing but... A flicker of hope sparked inside her. Daniel, if she followed the North Ridge Trail, she might reach the spot where he and his friends usually camped before heading back down the mountain. It was miles away, but anything was better than turning back toward the creature. Emily veered left, heading for the ridge. The wind howled violently against her back, nearly knocking her off balance. Pine needles whipped through the air like tiny, icy blades, but she pushed forward, refusing to glance behind her, no matter how many times she felt the sensation, like cold fingers brushing the back of her neck. She reached a fallen log and vaulted over it, her foot slipping slightly on moss. She caught herself just in time. But the forest around her went silent, completely silent. The wind stopped. The branches stopped moving. Even her breath sounded muted, swallowed by something consuming the space around her. Then, Crunch! A single footstep echoed behind her. Slow, heavy, too close. Emily's heart jolted violently. She spun around, lifting her flashlight. The beam stuttered, flickered, then stabilized, and illuminated nothing. Just dense darkness pressed between the trees. But the silence was wrong again. It wasn't empty. It was watching. She swung the beam to the right. Nothing. To the left. Nothing. She raised it higher. Nothing. Then, down low, near the base of a pine trunk, a smile, a glowing, stretched, impossible smile, hovering inches above the ground, as though the creature was crouched like an animal waiting to pounce. Emily screamed and stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The smile twitched, shifted, rose slowly, too slowly, higher and higher, until it towered several feet above her. As it rose, the body connected to it remained unseen, just the silhouette of a tall, twisted outline moving with predatory patience. She ran again, her legs trembling violently, pushing her lungs beyond their limit. Tears blurred her vision. Her breath came out in painful shreds. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears so loudly she couldn't hear anything else. Then she did hear something. Footsteps, not one set, multiple, soft, quick, almost playful steps darting between the trees around her, circling her as she ran. The forest came alive with sound, branches cracking, leaves rustling even without wind. It wasn't chasing her directly, it was herding her, guiding her, driving her somewhere. No, no, please, she sobbed as she stumbled through jagged roots and uneven ground. Ahead, the trees thinned, a clearing. She burst into the open space, gasping as she collapsed onto her hands and knees. The cold grass soaked through her jeans. She clutched at the soil, trembling violently. For a moment, there was nothing, just her ragged breathing, just her trembling hands, just the faint pulse pounding inside her skull. Then the sound returned, a whisper that drifted across the clearing like a breeze made of ice. Emily, look up. Her body froze. Every instinct screamed not to obey, but terror pushed her chin upward on its own. At the edge of the clearing between the trees stood three shapes. Tall, slender, bent at unnatural angles. Three grins floated in the darkness. Not one, not two, three, all staring directly at her, all glowing faintly like carved white wounds suspended in the void. Emily's scream tore through the night. Emily scrambled backward through the grass, her palms slipping against the cold earth as the three towering silhouettes stood motionless at the edge of the clearing. Their grins cut through the darkness like slits carved into reality itself, impossibly wide, floating above the vague shapes of their warped bodies. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They simply watched her struggle. The wind rushed through the clearing, swirling around her in chilling spirals that felt intentional. Her breath hitched. She pushed herself upright, swaying unsteadily as her legs threatened to collapse beneath her. The flashlight trembled violently in her hand, its weak beam flickering as though reacting to the creature's presence. "No, please," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible as tears blurred her vision. "Go away, please." The three grins twitched at the same time, all together, perfectly synchronized. Emily felt her stomach drop. Then the middle figure stepped forward, not smoothly, not naturally. Its limbs jerked in stiff, broken angles, as though pulled by invisible strings. Each motion bent the body into shapes that defied anatomy, its knee bending backward, its spine twisting too far, its head tilting at an angle that should have snapped a human neck. The other two followed, advancing with that same unnatural puppet-like motion. Soft, brittle, cracking sounds accompanied their movements, like bones grinding against stone. Emily stumbled backward until her foot struck a root. She fell again. The breath knocked from her lungs. She tried to crawl away, but the forest behind her was nothing but impenetrable darkness. The creatures entered the clearing fully now, their shadows stretching across the grass like long, clawed fingers reaching toward her. As they approached, the glowing grins grew brighter white, gleaming, almost phosphorescent. Then one of them whispered, but its lips never moved. Its body never shifted. The smile remained frozen. "Emily, why did you leave the cabin?" Her blood ran cold. The voice echoed inside her mind, not through the air. It pressed against her thoughts, digging into her memories like sharp, icy nails. I had to go," she stammered. "I had to run. I had to get away from you." The grin widened. "You can't get away. You never could." The creature moved closer, its shadow falling over her. Emily dragged herself backward until her spine hit a tree trunk. Bark scraped against her jacket. She lifted the flashlight again, her hand shaking violently. The beam fell upon the creature's chest. Nothing was there. No skin, no ribs, no shape. Just emptiness, a hollow silhouette with no features except the mouth. The two figures behind it suddenly vanished, snuffed out as though someone erased them from existence. Emily gasped, whipping her head in every direction. They were gone, but the darkness moved. The wind changed direction again, pushing cold air against her back. She jolted forward and spun around. One of them was behind her, so close she could feel its cold presence pressing inches from her skin. She tried to scream, but the breath caught in her throat as the creature leaned forward. Its grin hovered directly beside her ear. Then it whispered again, "We waited for you, Emily, all these years." Her entire body shook uncontrollably. "Why?" she cried. "Why me? What do you want?" For the first time, the creature's grin shifted. It grew wider, splitting impossibly far until its edges dug into the darkness like a wound tearing open. "We want what you promised us." Her mind reeled. "I never promised you anything." She choked. The clearing darkened. The trees bent inward, closing around her like the ribs of a colossal beast. The creature's whisper slithered through the air. "When you were a child, you did. You called to us. Do you not remember?" Emily shook her head violently. No, I didn't. But a memory stabbed into her mind unbidden. Sharp, cold, a young version of herself, standing outside the cabin at night, crying, lonely, wishing for anyone to take her fear away, to stay with her, to never leave. A childish voice. In the woods. If anyone is out there, please come to me. Emily's vision spun. No, No, that wasn't. The creature's smile widened into a blinding crescent, its voice filling the clearing with cold triumph. You called us first, Emily. And now, we've come to claim you. The remaining two figures reappeared in an instant, one on each side of her. Their grins ignited the forest floor in pale light as they leaned closer. Emily pressed her back against the tree, trembling so violently she thought her bones might shatter. The wind howled. The forest warped. The creatures moved in unison, reaching toward her with long, shadowy limbs. And Emily realized she might not escape this time. Emily's nails dug into the bark behind her as the three shadow figures closed in, their elongated limbs stretching across the clearing like tendrils of living darkness. The air grew heavy, dense enough that each breath felt like inhaling cold water. Her chest tightened painfully. She could feel their presence pressing inward, circling her, suffocating her. The forest had become a cage. The center figure leaned closer, its glowing smile widening with each inch it gained. It didn't walk. It didn't glide. It simply appeared nearer, as though distance meant nothing to the thing looming before her. Emily tried to raise her flashlight, but her arm shook so violently the beam jerked wildly across the clearing. Every time the light passed over one of the figures, their shadows rippled, shifting in unnatural waves like liquid darkness reacting to the presence of something alive. "I didn't call you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't mean it. I was a kid. I didn't understand." The creature's whisper cut her off, sharp as a blade gliding across glass. "You asked for someone who would never leave you. Someone who would always stay in the dark with you. And we heard you." Emily flinched. The memory struck harder now, clearer, more vivid. She remembered standing alone in the yard as a child, hugging herself tightly while shadows stretched between the trees. Her parents had gone to town. Night came faster than she expected. The forest swallowed the cabin in blackness, and loneliness wrapped around her small body like cold vines. She remembered wishing anyone would come out of the darkness to be with her. She didn't know that something was listening. Emily shook her head hard. "I didn't know you were real. I didn't mean it. Please just let me go. I'm not that kid anymore." The three smiles brightened as if amused. The figure on her left tilted its head, a jagged twitch snapping through its silhouette. "But we answered your call. We came for you. We waited because you belonged to us first." Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. Her lungs tightened, struggling to pull air past the paralyzing terror spreading down her spine. The creature on her right suddenly stepped forward, or rather, bent forward, folding its limbs like breaking branches. Its glowing smile hovered inches above her shoulder. She felt cold pour into her skin, crawling through her veins like frostbite. Her scream died in her throat. She tried to lift the flashlight again, but one of the figures reached out, not with a hand, its limbs stretched like a rope of shadow, stretching across the air and wrapping lightly around her wrist. The cold was instant, violent. Her fingers went numb. The flashlight slipped and fell, its beam slanting across the grass. The entire clearing warped within its glow. Shadows twitched, trees bent inward harder. The ground pulsed, as though something beneath the earth shifted, responding to the creature's movement. Emily choked back a sob. "Please, somebody help me." The creature behind her whispered again, its voice sliding across her mind like slick oil. "There is no one else here. Emily, only us, only what you wished for." The trees groaned as though they understood those words. Branches twisting overhead, snapping softly under unseen pressure. The forest seemed to lean closer, eager to witness what came next. The cold tendril tightened around her wrist, lifting her arm slowly upward, forcing her to face the center figure directly. Its grin glowed so brightly now that it illuminated the emptiness beneath. No jaw, no skull, no skin, just hollow space, mocking her. Emily's breath hitched, her vision blurred as panic suffocated her. And then she heard something new, a distant sound, a real sound, a human voice calling out. Emily, her eyes snapped wide. Daniel, her brother. He was somewhere beyond the clearing, his voice echoing through the trees. Frantic, panicked, the creatures reacted instantly. The glowing smiles dimmed. Their heads snapped sharply toward the direction of Daniel's voice, twisting unnaturally far like owls, turning their necks beyond anatomical limits. Emily seized the moment. With every ounce of strength left in her, she yanked her arm backward. The tendril of shadow resisted, cold and solid as iron, but the sudden distraction weakened its grip enough for her to wrench herself free. Pain seared through her wrist. She staggered forward, stumbling onto her knees. The creatures turned back toward her, their grins brightening with fury. The forest trembled. The tendrils snapped forward. Emily ran. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the stabbing pain in her ankle, and sprinted toward Daniel's voice. Branches slashed at her arms, roots clawed at her boots. The forest felt alive, trying to hold her back. Behind her, the creatures shrieked. Not human screams, not animal cries. Something far worse high, distorted, echoing like metal tearing apart. Their footsteps erupted behind her fast, skittering, unnatural. Emily didn't look back. She couldn't. The forest ahead was pitch black, but Daniel's voice cut through the chaos again. "Emily, keep running." She ran harder, tears streaming, breath burning her throat raw. Behind her, the smiles glowed brighter and brighter, lighting up the forest like pale lanterns of death. And she knew the nightmare had only just begun. Emily's legs felt like they were made of fire and ice at the same time, burning from exhaustion, freezing from terror as she sprinted toward Daniel's voice. Her lungs screamed, each inhale cutting through her chest like shards of glass. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, not with the creatures behind her, shrieking through the darkness like broken wind chimes twisted by a hurricane. Branches cracked violently as the three shadow forms tore through the forest in pursuit. Their movements were faster now, far faster than anything human, skittering and lurching across the ground, their grins blazing like moonlit gashes. Emily heard Daniel shouting again, closer this time. "Emily, this way!" Her heart surged with desperate hope. She forced her tired legs to move faster, stumbling over roots and slipping on wet leaves as she dove deeper into the forest. But the forest wasn't letting her go so easily. The trees shifted subtle at first, then unmistakable. Trunks leaning in, branches weaving together overhead, forming twisted shapes that seemed almost deliberate. The path narrowed as the woods contorted, as though the entire mountain wanted to keep her for the shadows. They're closing it. They're closing the forest around me. A flash of movement on her right made her gasp. One of the grinning figures lunged through the trees, its body elongated, stretched thin, like a smear of darkness dragged by invisible hands. It reappeared ahead of her, its smile hovering above the forest floor like a trap waiting to spring shut. No, no, please. She veered sharply left, nearly losing her footing as she slid down a slope of loose soil and pine needles. Pain shot through her ankle as she hit the ground hard, but adrenaline shoved her onward. The creature's smile widened. The light it emitted grew so bright it cast long, warped shadows across the trees. The other two were close behind. Emily could hear them, not running, not walking, sliding, as if their bodies were dragging across the ground, gliding silently, except for the occasional brittle crack of branches snapping beneath them. She stumbled into a small ravine, tumbling down the hillside. Dirt filled her hands, her nails scraping against rocks. She hit the bottom with a grunt. Her bones rattled from the impact, and she felt the world tilt for a moment as her vision swam. Then, footsteps, not human, soft, too soft, like cloth brushing across dead leaves. Emily pushed herself upright and staggered forward. The ravine funneled her deeper into darkness, its walls growing steeper. Panic spiked. She didn't want to be trapped here. Daniel's voice echoed distantly through the pines. Emily, keep talking so I can find you. She opened her mouth, but only a trembled whisper came out. Daniel, I'm here. A distorted giggle echoed behind her. Emily spun. One of the creatures slid down the ravine wall, its limbs rearranging in sharp, disjointed motions as if gravity didn't fully apply to its form. Its body was a smear of darkness, its edges bleeding into the air like ink dissolved in water. The grin glowed brighter. Then the other two appeared at the top ridge, their mouths lighting the treetops like pale lanterns. They're cornering me. They're pushing me down. Emily looked ahead. The ravine stretched on, narrowing until it became a tight corridor of rocks and roots. She had no choice. She ran toward it, her breaths coming in panicked sobs. The walls squeezed in around her shoulders. Jagged stone scraped her arms as she pushed through the tight passage. It felt like the mountain was swallowing her whole. Behind her, the creature's whispers grew louder. You belong to us. Emily, don't run from what you called. The ravine walls suddenly opened into a wider space, a drop-off, a cliff edge veiled in fog. Emily skidded to a stop just inches from falling into darkness. Her boots sent pebbles tumbling over the ledge, disappearing into a void she couldn't see the bottom of. Her chest hammered wildly. Trapped behind her, the shadows emerged from the ravine, their grins brightening the fog like white fire. their arms stretched unnaturally long, dragging across the ground as they approached. Emily stepped back instinctively, and her heel slipped on loose gravel at the cliff's edge. She flailed her arms, barely catching her balance before plunging into the abyss. A cold tendril of shadow reached toward her ankle. No! Something crashed through the forest behind the creatures. A flashlight beam exploded through the fog. Emily! Daniel! He burst into the clearing, his breath ragged, his face white with fear. A hiking knife glinted in his hand. The creatures snapped their necks toward him in perfect unison. Daniel didn't stop. He sprinted straight toward them. Get away from her! His voice broke through the night like a gunshot. For the first time, the creatures recoiled, their grins dimmed, their shadows rippled as though something unseen pushed them backward. Emily's knees buckled in relief, but the cliff edge crumbled slightly beneath her boots. Daniel reached out a hand. Emily, take my hand. Now! Emily lunged toward him, just as the creatures lunged toward both of them. The world seemed to split into two moments, happening at the same time. Daniel lunging toward her with his arm outstretched, and the three shadow creatures lunging forward with their glowing grins, widening like wounds torn open in the night. Emily's hand slapped into Daniel. Their fingers locked. Daniel yanked her away from the cliff edge with all his strength. Just as a shadowy tendril snapped shut where her ankle had been, the impact threw both of them backward, tumbling across the rocky ground. Emily's shoulder slammed into the earth. Daniel rolled, skidding to a stop beside her. The creatures shrieked, not with mouths, but with the air itself splitting around their grins. A high-pitched, warping sound that made the trees tremble and Emily's ears ring painfully. Daniel scrambled to his feet, placing himself between Emily and the approaching figures. "Stay behind me," he shouted, gripping the knife tightly. Emily's breath came out in sharp, broken gasps. "Daniel, they aren't human. I can see that," he yelled back, fear and fury twisting his voice. The three figures stretched taller, their limbs unraveling like ropes pulled taut, their heads bent at unnatural angles until their grins hovered at the same height as Daniel's eyes, glowing brighter with each step forward. Their shadows merged, spilling across the ground like thick, ink-black liquid. Daniel raised the knife. It shook in his hand. One of the creatures lunged. Daniel swung the blade, and to both their shock, the knife carved through the shadow's arm. The creature recoiled violently. Its severed limb dissolved into smoke, dissipating into the air. Emily stared, stunned. "They can be hurt," Daniel whispered, almost in disbelief. But the victory lasted only a heartbeat. The severed limb reformed. It stretched out of the creature's torso, reshaping itself in seconds like liquid darkness returning to its mold. The grin brightened again, angrier, sharper. Daniel stiffened. "Oh, that's not good." Emily grabbed his sleeve. "Daniel, we have to run. Now!" The creatures began circling, their movements faster, now jerking, twitching, shifting positions so quickly Emily couldn't tell where they would strike from next. One of them blinked out of existence, vanished. Daniel jerked back. "Where did it?" It reappeared behind him. Emily screamed, "Daniel, move!" He spun as the creature lunged, slashing with the knife. The blade cut across the grin light, scattering like shards of glass. But the shadow simply rippled, its form twisting around the attack. The grin stretched wider. Emily grabbed Daniel's arm. "Run!" They sprinted back toward the ravine corridor, dodging jagged rocks and debris. The creatures shrieked again, their dissonant voices echoing off the stone walls, vibrating through the air like sonic blades. The ground shook. Roots burst from the earth as if pulled by invisible hands, twisting, reaching, trying to snare Emily's legs. Daniel hacked at them with the knife, cutting through the living roots as they slithered toward her like blind snakes. "Keep going. Don't stop." Emily pushed forward, the air thinning as the ravine narrowed. Her chest burned, her vision blurred. Behind them, the shadows surged faster. They weren't chasing anymore. They were hunting. A cold whisper brushed her ears. "Emily, you can run, but you can't leave us." She stumbled forward, nearly falling. Daniel caught her and pulled her upright. "We're almost out," he shouted, "just a little farther." But the ravine walls contorted, sliding inward like jaws closing. The passage tightened until only one person could squeeze through at a time. "Daniel, go first." Emily gasped. "No, you first." A shadowy tendril whipped through the air, nearly striking Daniel's leg. He grabbed Emily and shoved her ahead. "Go!" She squeezed through the narrow rock opening, scraping her shoulders against. Pain tore down her arm as the jagged wall sliced her skin. She burst into the forest on the other side, gasping for air, turning back. Daniel was halfway through, but the creatures were already there. 3 grins lit the narrow passage like white sunbeams cutting through the dark. Daniel slashed wildly, but the shadows closed in. Emily screamed, reaching for him. "Daniel!" Daniel grabbed her hand, stretching it through the gap. Their fingers touched, but one of the creatures screamed, its grin exploding with light, and a tendril of darkness wrapped around Daniel's waist. It yanked him backward violently. Emily's nails scraped the stone as she tried to hold on, but Daniel's grip slipped. "No, Emily, run!" he shouted, his voice cracking with terror. He was pulled back into the ravine, swallowed by the shadows. Emily's scream tore through the forest as she watched the darkness fold inward, sealing the passage with a sound like stone grinding shut. Daniel was gone. The forest fell silent. And then, behind her, a whisper. "Emily, now it's just you again, just like before." She turned. A tall shadow stood between the trees, its grin brighter than ever. Emily staggered backward until her spine struck a tree trunk, her fingers digging into the rough bark as she struggled to breathe. Daniel's last scream echoed inside her skull, replaying over and over like a jagged wound reopening each time she inhaled. Her brother, her only hope, gone in an instant, swallowed into the ravine by those impossible creatures. Her throat burned, her chest ached, tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. "No, no, Daniel, please," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of panic and grief. But the forest did not answer with comfort. It answered with the smile. The towering shadow between the trees did not move. It simply stood there, its shape warped, its edges dissolving into the darkness like smoke pulled upward by an invisible current. The grin glowed brighter, spreading slowly across its face if it even had a face. Its features were still hidden behind its luminous crescent mouth. The air grew colder. Then the voice came again. "You were never meant to escape us. Emily, why do you keep running?" Her pulse hammered violently against her ribs. She pressed one hand to her mouth to stop a sob from escaping. "You took him," she whispered shakily. "You took Daniel. He had nothing to do with this." The creature's grin widened. "He touched what belongs to you." Emily felt the world tilt, her vision blurred with fresh tears. "What do you want from me?" she cried out. "Why me? Why didn't you leave me alone?" The forest seemed to lean in, listening. The creature only whispered back, its voice curling around her like smoke. "Because you called to us first, and because you are still calling, even now." Emily shook her head violently. I'm not calling you. I'm terrified of you." The grin brightened, cracking open wider. "Fear is not silence. Fear is the loudest call of all." The wind roared suddenly through the trees, shaking branches and hurling leaves across the forest floor. The creature stepped forward, one slow, deliberate glide. The grass beneath its feet withered instantly, turning black and brittle. Emily pushed herself off the tree, backing away fast. Her trembling legs threatened to collapse beneath her, but she kept moving, stumbling blindly into the deeper dark. The creature followed, not slowly, not fast, but inevitably. Every time Emily blinked, it was closer, gliding instead of walking, its limbs dragging behind like long shadows caught in a current of darkness. The grin remained motionless, frozen in an expression of perpetual hunger. Emily turned and ran. Branches tore at her arms. Roots caught her ankles. Her breath came in sharp, broken gasps. She could barely see through the tears streaking across her vision. "Don't look back," she told herself. "Don't look back. Don't look back." But she could feel the creature at her heels, the cold spreading like frostbite down her spine as it closed the distance. She heard its whisper brushing the back of her neck. "You ran from us once as a child, and now you run again. But we always find you, Emily. Always." She stumbled into a shallow stream, icy water splashing across her legs. The shock of cold jolted her senses, forcing her to refocus. She crawled up the opposite bank, breathing hard. The forest here was even darker, the air thicker, the silence heavier. Emily's vision burned as she wiped her tears. Think, Daniel is still alive. He has to be. They wouldn't kill him. They want something else. They want me. Her chest tightened painfully. She needed to reach higher ground. She needed to see the ridge. She needed to get to the old ranger station on the summit, a place her father once told her had a radio strong enough to reach the valley. It was miles away, but it was her only chance. She pushed forward, forced her numb legs to climb a steep incline. Each step felt like lifting concrete. The cold gnawed at her bones. Her wrist still throbbed from where the shadow tendril had wrapped around her earlier, now bruised, swollen. the skin tinted a faint blue-black. She reached a clearing near the top of the hill and collapsed onto her knees. Panting, her lungs screamed for air. Her heartbeat slammed against her chest with violent force. For a moment, there was quiet. She dared to believe she'd lost them. But then, the trees behind her bent outward, as if something enormous passed between them. Emily spun. The creature stood in the center of the clearing, still, tall, smiling. But this time, it wasn't alone. Two more shadow figures emerged on either side of it. All three moved in perfect unison, just like before. Their grins tightened, glowing brighter until the forest floor was bathed in pale, unnatural light. Emily's voice cracked. "No, please, no, no." The creatures lifted their arms. Long tendrils of darkness unwound from their limbs like living ropes, curving, twisting, reaching toward her. Emily stumbled backward and fell, her palms scraping the cold earth. The shadows surged. The air split with a sound like cracking ice. Emily screamed, and the forest swallowed her voice whole. Emily's scream dissolved into the wind as she scrambled backward on all fours, clawing at the dirt until her fingers bled. The tendrils of darkness shot toward her like snakes made of shadow, twisting and snapping across the clearing. She rolled to the side just as one slammed into the ground where she had been a moment earlier, splitting the earth like a blade. The forest shuddered. The trees bent away from the impact. Leaves exploded upward. The ground rippled as if something massive shifted beneath it. Emily pushed herself up and stumbled into a sprint, her legs shaking violently. Her lungs burned, her vision spun, but panic drove her forward raw, wild, desperate. Behind her, the creatures unleashed another chorus of warped shrieks. They weren't chasing her anymore. They were hunting her with precision. The shadows flickered between the trees, appearing ahead of her, then vanishing, reappearing on her left, her right, as though circling her path. Every time she changed direction, one of them materialized like a specter anticipating her next move. They're playing with me, forcing me where they want me. She darted downhill, sliding on loose soil. Her shoulder slammed into a tree trunk, but she didn't stop. She shoved herself onward through dense brush. Branches tore at her hair and skin. Thorns shredded her jacket sleeves. Her heartbeat thundered. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. Then the forest opened again, another clearing. But this one felt wrong. It was too still, too quiet, too empty. The wind didn't blow. The leaves didn't move. Even the stars above seemed frozen in place, suspended like tiny white eyes watching her from afar. Emily slowed, gasping for breath. "Please," she whispered to no one. I can't keep running." A soft crunch of leaves answered behind her. She turned slowly. One of the creatures stood at the edge of the clearing, its grin glowing faintly like a crescent moon dipped in bone-white light. The others slipped from the tree line moments later, silhouettes stretching across the clearing floor like shadows cast by a distorted sun. They separated, taking positions around her, trapping her. Again, Emily backed away until her heel hit something solid, an old tree stump, rotted and hollow. She grabbed its edge, using it to steady her trembling body. "Daniel," she whispered. Please be alive. Please. The center figure leaned forward, its grin split wide enough that Emily felt bile rise in her throat. You still think of him, still call his name. The voice slithered into her skull like a cold worm. Her muscles locked. She clenched her jaw hard enough that pain shot through her temples. You should be calling ours instead. After all, you called first. Emily shook her head. I didn't. I was a child. I didn't know what I was doing. The creature took one slow step forward. The clearing darkened. Children speak true desires. We heard yours. We answered. And now we want what was promised. Emily's breath hitched. I promised nothing to you. The creature tilted its head all the way sideways until its grin was vertical. Then why are you still afraid? Why do you still remember us? Emily's knees buckled. Her voice shook uncontrollably. Because you tried to take me. You terrified me. I never wanted you. I never wanted this. The creature's grin shifted again into something like amusement. Fear is not rejection. Fear is an invitation. The ground beneath Emily's feet vibrated, then split. A thin line of darkness snaked outward from the stump, cracking open the earth like dry clay. The crack widened, stretching toward the three creatures, linking them together like veins feeding a single monstrous heart. Emily stumbled away from it, horrified. What are you doing? The creatures lifted their arms. Tendrils of shadow rose from the crack, reaching upward, swirling into a spiraling vortex of black mist. Emily shielded her face as wind erupted outward, blasting through the clearing with hurricane force. Leaves spiraled, stones lifted into the air. The forest groaned as trees bent inward toward the forming vortex. She screamed and tried to run, but a tendril coiled around her ankle. Cold, so cold, it burned, wrapped around her skin. No, no, she cried, kicking wildly. Let me go. The tendril tightened, pulling her toward the darkness. You are ours, Emily. You always were. Another tendril wrapped around her wrist, another around her waist. She screamed again, her nails digging into the dirt as she clawed desperately for something, anything to hold on to. The vortex roared louder, pulling the air from her lungs. The ground beneath her cracked further. A massive split opened under her knees. Darkness churned below deep, endless, hungry. Emily felt her grip failing. Her fingers slipped through dirt. Her body was dragged closer. The creatures stepped forward, grins glowing like open wounds. The darkness below widened, and Emily felt herself begin to fall. Emily's fingers slipped through the dirt as the tendrils dragged her toward the widening rift beneath her. The darkness roiled like storm clouds trapped underground, alive, hungry, whispering to her in voices she couldn't fully hear but could feel crawling beneath her skin. Her scream tore through the forest as her body slid closer to the precipice. The air around her was sucked downward into the vortex, pulling her hair upward, flattening her clothes against her body. Dust, leaves, and broken twigs swirled in a violent spiral. No, no, stop, she cried, kicking wildly. The tendrils tightened around her limbs, cold as if they were draining heat and life directly from her veins. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably, her nails tore, her throat burned from screaming. The three shadow creatures stepped closer to the split earth, their grins glowing brighter, so bright now they illuminated the churning darkness below as if it were a bottomless well filled with swirling smoke. The center figure whispered, "Come back to us. Emily, come home. I don't belong to you," she choked out, pulling with every ounce she had left. The ground shook. The tendrils jerked harder. Emily's body lurched forward, half her torso hanging over the edge. Her legs dangled over nothing. The roaring vortex below pulled at her like a living storm. Her grip found a root, a thick, gnarled root protruding from the ground. She clung to it desperately, feeling it slice into her palms. Blood trickled down her wrists, sliding over the shadow tendrils wrapped around her. "I won't go with you," she screamed again. The creature leaned close enough for her to see the edges of its grin splitting outward like tearing fabric. "You already did. When you were a child." Something inside Emily snapped. "No," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "No, I didn't know. I didn't understand. I never wanted you. I wanted to be safe. I wanted someone to stay with me because I was scared. I never called you." The creature's smile flickered. For the first time, a crack in its certainty, the forest wind shifted, groaning through the trees as if reacting to her words. The tendril around her wrist loosened, not much but enough for her to feel it. Emily's heart thrashed with a new, fragile spark of hope. She dug her nails deeper into the root, ignoring the pain slicing through her palms. "You don't own me," she said through gritted teeth. "You never did." The creature's grin twitched again. The vortex roared louder, pulling harder, as if trying to silence her rebellion. But she didn't stop. "You aren't my fear," she gasped. "You're just something that found me in it. You're not a promise. You're not a bond. You're nothing." The tendril around her waist recoiled, hissing like steam meeting fire. The creatures screeched. Their voices merged into one shrill, metallic howl that rattled the forest canopy. Emily flinched at the piercing sound, but didn't let go. She pulled herself upward inch by inch, her muscles screaming, her arms shaking violently under her weight. The tendrils clamped tighter in retaliation, but the root held. She lifted her torso back over the edge, forcing her legs onto solid ground. Dirt scattered, stones tumbled into the abyss below. Then a second root snapped up from the earth beneath her hand. An old tree root maybe, or something else helping her. It didn't matter. She grabbed it, she pulled, and she screamed with everything inside her. "You can't have me." The final tendril shredded like paper, evaporating into black mist. The vortex shrieked, collapsing inward with a violent suction that sent debris flying into the air. The darkness churned, like it was swallowing itself. The crack in the ground closing rapidly. The three shadow creatures lunged, but for the first time, they weren't fast enough. Emily rolled away from the closing chasm, just as the ground sealed shut with a thunderous crack. crack that echoed across the entire forest. The vortex vanished. The wind died. Silence fell. The creatures staggered, their grins flickering erratically like a flame struggling to stay lit. Emily lay on the forest floor, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Dirt covered her arms. Blood stained her sleeves. Her whole body shook, but she was alive. She had pulled herself out. The creatures stared at her silent, trembling, their glowing mouths dimming with every second. Emily wiped her eyes, forcing herself to her feet despite the weakness shaking her bones. She glared at them, and for the first time since she was a child, they stepped back, a single step. Their smiles faltered. Emily took a step forward. Her voice was hoarse, cracked, but certain. "I am not yours." The forest trembled. The creatures recoiled again, grins shrinking, bodies flickering like broken shadows trying to hold shape. Emily felt strength in her chest she didn't recognize, strength that terrified them, and strength she desperately needed. But the moment wasn't over, because suddenly a familiar voice screamed in the distance. "Emily, help me. Daniel, alive." Emily's breath caught. Her blood ran cold, and the three creatures turned their heads slowly toward the sound. Their smiles reigniting. Emily's breath hitched as Daniel's scream tore through the night raw, strained, filled with a pain she had never heard in his voice before. It wasn't a distant cry carried by chance wind. It was close, too close. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice cracking as fear and relief collided in her chest. "He's alive. The three shadow creatures turned toward the sound with a slow, synchronized motion that made Emily's skin crawl. Their grins, which had dimmed after she pulled herself from the abyss, reignited in jagged crescents, bright, sharp, eager. They had found their anchor again, their leverage, their way to break her. "Daniel, no," Emily breathed, stepping backward instinctively. "Don't you touch him. Don't you dare." The center creature tilted its head sharply, its grin widening as if mocking her attempt at defiance. "You are stronger than before, but strength means nothing when you still fear losing him." Emily's throat tightened. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a second scream, sharper, choked, echoing through the trees like a knife dragged across glass. Emily snapped. She didn't think. She ran. Branches whipped her face, slicing thin lines across her cheeks. But she pushed through the pain. The forest twisted around her, the darkness shifting like a living maze. Roots rose under her feet. The ground tilted. The trees closed in, but she fought forward, driven by one thing: Daniel, her brother, her only family, her only anchor. He needed her. Behind her, the creatures moved silently. No footsteps, no breathing, only their glowing smiles appeared intermittently between the trees as they followed her with unnatural speed, weaving through the forest like drifting phantoms. Emily burst into a narrow ravine trail, the same one she and Daniel had run through earlier. Her chest tightened at the memory of him being dragged into the darkness. Daniel, Daniel. Her voice cracked from the force of her screams. A faint groan answered. Her heart lurched. She sprinted toward the sound. The path dipped sharply, and she stumbled, catching herself with bleeding palms. She scrambled upright and pushed forward, rounding a rocky bend, and stopped. Her breath died in her throat. Daniel lay at the base of a large tree, half conscious, his clothes torn, his body bruised, as if he had been dragged across stone. His hands clawed at the dirt as he tried to lift himself. "Emily," he whispered, voice ragged. "Don't come closer." She rushed to him anyway. I'm here. Daniel, Emily, stop!" His voice broke. Terror flashed in his eyes. Then she understood why. The shadows behind him stretched outward, long, tall, unfolding like the opening wings of a monstrous insect. 3 silhouettes detached themselves from the darkness behind the tree trunk, grinning, waiting, their mouths glowing so brightly the forest floor glimmered in pale light. Emily froze. The creatures did not attack. They stepped aside. A gesture, a presentation, as if offering Daniel to her, or offering her to Daniel. Daniel coughed, blood in his voice. "Emily, run, please. They're using me. They want you." Emily stepped forward anyway. "No, I'm not leaving you again." Daniel shook his head violently, panic surging in his eyes. "You don't understand, Emily. When they pulled me in, I saw something." Before he could finish, a tendril of shadow erupted from the nearest creature and wrapped around his throat. Emily screamed. "No!" Daniel clawed at the tendril, kicking against the ground as it lifted him into the air. His feet scraped the dirt. His voice strangled. "Stop! Let him go!" Emily yelled, her voice cracking apart. The creature's grin widened. "We gave you a choice once, Emily, as a child." Another creature leaned closer, its grin stretching impossibly wide. "Choose again. Choose who stays with us, you or him." Emily staggered backward, horror ripping through her chest. No, that's not." Daniel's choked gasp cut her off. His body jerked violently as the tendril tightened around his neck. His eyes met hers wide, terrified, pleading. Don't choose me," he rasped. Another tendril coiled around his chest, lifting him higher. The creature's whispers merged. "Choose, or we take you both." Emily felt the world blur. Her legs shook. Her lungs collapsed. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She couldn't. And then something ignited inside her. A spark. A memory. "You don't own me." Her voice. Her defiance. Her strength. She had pushed them back once. She had broken their grip on her. She could do it again. Her hands clenched. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes filled with fire despite the tears streaming down her face. "No," she whispered. Then louder. "No." She stepped forward, toward the creatures, toward Daniel, toward the shadows. "No, I'm not choosing. I'm not giving you anything." The creatures flickered. Their grins twitched. Their forms rippled like flames exposed to wind. Emily took another step. "You don't get to use him." Another. "You don't get to take him." Another. "You don't get me." The forest trembled. The tendril around Daniel faltered just slightly, but enough for his strangled breath to gasp in precious air. Emily's voice rose with a power she didn't know she had. "I choose none of you." The creatures shrieked, the forest bent, the ground cracked, the smiles flared, and something enormous, unseen, shifted in the darkness behind them, something that even they seemed afraid of. For a moment, the forest held its breath. Emily stood trembling but unbroken, her voice still echoing through the trees like a crack of thunder that didn't belong to this world. The creatures recoiled not far, not enough to flee, but enough to reveal something she had never seen in them before. Hesitation. Their glowing grins flickered, dimming in shallow spasms, as though something inside them had been shaken loose. The tendril crushing Daniel's throat loosened just enough for him to gasp in a ragged breath. His eyes fluttered, dazed, but he was conscious, alive. He croaked, trying to reach for her even as the tendril held him suspended. "Don't stop her." "I'm not," she whispered. "I won't." But her voice trembled because she felt it a shift in the air. Not the cold of the creatures, not the unnatural stillness they brought. Something else, something older, something deeper. It crawled through the forest floor in a slow, cold wave, rippling through dirt and roots like a buried heartbeat awakening. The creatures sensed it too. They froze completely. For the first time since Emily had seen them, their grins faltered, not in fear of her, but in fear of something behind them. The wind died. The fog thickened, rising like smoke from the soil. Daniel's eyes widened suddenly. Emily, behind them. Emily felt it before she saw it. A presence, a pressure, a weight in the air so heavy it made her bones vibrate. The three creatures turned their heads in perfect unison, slowly, mechanically, until their glowing smiles faced the darkness behind them. The trees at the far edge of the clearing bent inward, creaking as if forced by invisible hands. The shadows there deepened, thickening into a mass of swirling black mist. It rose, shifted, coalesced, and from within that swirling void, a fourth silhouette emerged. But this one was different. Much taller, much darker, much more complete. While the other creatures were hollow outlines with floating smiles, this one had shape depth, something inside its shadowed form that felt horribly alive, and its smile was enormous, so wide it nearly bisected its head, so bright it lit the fog with bone-white light, so sharp it looked carved into reality itself. The three smaller creatures collapsed to their knees instantly as if bowing. Emily felt her heart drop. This is what they fear. The massive silhouette stepped forward, each movement smoother than the others, its limbs flowing like smoke. The grin didn't flicker. It remained fixed, eternal, radiant with nightmarish hunger. The smaller creatures whispered in a language Emily couldn't understand, voices scraping like metal being bent. But the towering figure ignored them. Its glowing grin turned toward Emily. Her legs nearly gave out. She felt it invading her thoughts, not whispering, not speaking, but pressing into her mind like a cold blade sliding beneath her skin. She clutched her head, gasping. Daniel thrashed, struggling against the tendril. "Emily, run, run." I can't," she choked, her knees hitting the ground. The massive creature stepped closer. With every inch, the forest dimmed, the trees bent, the air thinned, the world shrank into its shadow. Then it raised one long arm, a tendril thicker than a tree root uncoiled from its shape, dragging across the ground like a living rope of darkness. It moved toward Emily slowly, almost gently, like a hand reaching to claim something precious. Emily cried out, clawing backward, "No, no, no!" But the tendril kept coming. Daniel screamed her name, voice cracking with terror. "Emily, get up! I can't! I can't!" she gasped, the pressure in her skull almost unbearable. The massive creature leaned forward, its smile widening even further. Suddenly, light, a tiny spark, faint, warm. Emily looked down, confused. Her hands, the blood on her palms, were glowing. A soft ember-like glow pulsed beneath her skin, spreading up her arms in delicate golden threads. The towering creature stopped. The tendril froze inches from her chest. Daniel stared, wide-eyed. "Emily, your hands." Emily felt warmth. Real warmth radiating through her bones, pushing back against the crushing cold of the creatures. The light grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Her heartbeat. Emily swallowed hard. What is happening? The massive creature's smile dimmed just a flicker, but enough to reveal something shocking. Fear. It feared her. The three smaller creatures recoiled, whispering frantic, broken sounds as the glow from Emily's hands intensified. Emily felt strength rise inside her, not from anger or fear, but from something deeper, something older, something that belonged to her alone. She lifted her trembling hands toward the massive creature. "Stay away from me." The glow burst outward. A wave of warm, golden light blasted through the clearing, striking the shadows with explosive force. The three smaller creatures screamed, shrieking in twisted agony as they crumpled to the ground. The massive creature staggered backward, its grin flickering violently, edges warping like melting wax. Daniel dropped from the tendril, collapsing to the dirt as the shadow coil dissolved. Emily gasped, watching in awe and terror as the towering silhouette writhed under the golden flare radiating from her body. The forest shook, the fog tore apart, the night itself rippled. The massive creature regained its footing, snarling in a low, thunderous tone. Its grin sharpened, its shape expanded. It stepped forward again, furious. Emily's glow dimmed suddenly, flickering weakly as exhaustion punched through her body. "No," she whispered, falling to one knee. "Not yet, not yet." Daniel crawled toward her, desperate. "Emily, get up. We have to move." The massive shadow loomed over them like a collapsing mountain, its grin blazing brighter than ever, and the forest erupted with darkness. The forest exploded into darkness so thick it swallowed sound. Emily grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him toward her as branches bent downward like claws trying to cage them. The towering creature's grin widened, illuminating the swirling black fog wrapping around its form like a living cloak. Emily struggled to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her, her strength leaking away faster than she could hold onto it. The golden glow in her hands sputtered like a dying ember. "Emily, get up," Daniel urged, voice shaking but desperate. He pulled her arm over his shoulder, trying to lift her. I can't, she whispered, her head spinning. The light, it's fading. Daniel gripped her tighter. Then lean on me. We're getting out of here. I'm not letting them take you. Behind them, the three smaller creatures rose slowly from the ground, their twisted forms glitching in and out of the shadows like broken reflections in shattered glass. Their grins were dimmer, distorted, but as the towering creature stepped forward, its enormous mouth blazing with white-hot hunger, the smaller creatures straightened as if fueled by its presence. Branches snapped, the ground vibrated. The forest whispered with 100 voices not human. Emily, Emily, Emily. Her name echoed through the trees, carried by a voice too large to belong to anything living. Daniel flinched, shielding Emily as the massive figure approached. It knows your name, Daniel whispered in terror. It's always known, Emily murmured weakly. The giant shadow lunged. Daniel pulled Emily aside just as a colossal tendril cracked into the earth, splitting the ground open like thunder. Soil erupted upward. Roots tore free. A crater formed where they had been moments before. Move, Daniel shouted. He dragged Emily through the clearing, dodging falling branches and rising cracks. The forest warped wildly, trees twisted violently sideways, their trunks curving as if fleeing the giant shadow. Leaves spun like razors. The air pulsed with unnatural electricity. Another tendril lashed toward them. Emily raised her hand instinctively. A flicker of golden light burst from her palm. The tendril recoiled with a violent hiss, but the glow vanished instantly after. Emily gasped, clutching her chest. It's weaker. I can't control it. It doesn't matter, Daniel yelled. Just use it when you can. We just need space. But the massive creature was not losing patience. It stepped forward with earth-shaking force, the forest floor cracking beneath its weightless form. Everything around it dimmed the trees, the sky, even the stars overhead flickered like dying sparks. The creature's grin widened until it seemed to swallow half its shadowed face. You cannot escape, Emily. The dark remembers you. Daniel dragged her deeper into the forest, and for a moment, Emily felt them pulling ahead of the shadows. She could hear Daniel's heartbeat, strong and fast against her ear. We're almost there, he whispered. There's an old fire trail up here. If we can reach the ridge. His sentence snapped in half. A tendril wrapped around his ankle. Daniel screamed as he was yanked backward across the dirt. Daniel, Emily shrieked. She lunged for him, grabbing his arm with both hands. Her palms burned, her nails tore, but she held on. The tendril thickened, twisting around his leg like a constrictor. Daniel cried out, pain ripping through his voice. Emily's heart hammered, her vision fogged with panic, and something inside her cracked again. No, she whispered. No, no. Her hands ignited. Golden light burst from her skin like molten fire, surging up her arms, flooding through her veins. The glow this time was different, brighter, hotter, alive. She squeezed Daniel's arm with everything she had, and the light leapt from her palms into the tendril. The shadow creature shrieked. The tendril exploded in a burst of white smoke, melting into ash. Daniel collapsed into her arms. Gasping, Emily fell with him, her body trembling violently as the golden energy faded. The world swayed, everything blurred. Emily Daniel's voice was thin, terrified. "What is happening to you? I don't know," she breathed, "but it's inside me." The forest suddenly fell silent. Every insect, every leaf, every whisper frozen. A cold wind blew through the clearing, not from the forest, but from the towering creature itself. Its enormous grin dimmed, then sharpened again into a blade-thin crescent as it leaned forward. It placed a massive hand, pure shadow, onto the ground. The earth beneath Emily and Daniel shifted, then rose. The creature was lifting the entire clearing, lifting them. Emily screamed, grabbing Daniel. The soil beneath their feet cracked and lifted like a raft of earth torn from the world. The massive shadow creature pulled the chunk upward, as if plucking a piece of fruit from a branch. Emily and Daniel clung to each other as they were lifted toward its enormous grin, the forest shrinking below them. Daniel whispered in horror, "Emily, it doesn't want to kill you." The creature leaned closer, its smile stretching wider. "It wants to take you back." Emily stared into the blinding grin, her heart pounding with terror and furious defiance. "No," she whispered. Her hands began to glow again. "We're not going with you." The towering shadow hissed, and the forest shook as it lunged forward. The night sky spun around Emily as the colossal creature lifted the slab of earth higher and higher, its shadow stretching across the treetops like a living eclipse. The wind roared past her ears, but it felt hollow, like the air was being swallowed rather than moved. Daniel clung to her, his grip shaking, eyes wide with terror, as the monstrous grin loomed only yards away. "Emily, your hands!" Daniel gasped. She looked down. The golden glow flickered weakly across her palms, sputtering like dying embers. She clenched her fists, trying to summon the warmth, the power, the light, but exhaustion weighed her limbs like lead. "It's not coming," she whispered, voice breaking. The massive creature leaned closer. Its grin expanded, splitting upward and downward, jawless yet impossibly expressive. The glowing crescent curved into an unnatural arc, illuminating the fog swirling around them. "You cannot run from what you asked for, from what you awoke." The creature's voice vibrated through her bones rather than her ears. Emily's heart thrashed in her chest. "I didn't ask for you. I didn't awaken anything." The creature tilted its head in a slow, taunting arc. "You are the door, Emily. You opened, and we came." The forest groaned below as the slab of earth tilted. Emily and Daniel slid dangerously close to the edge, pebbles falling away into the yawning darkness. Daniel grabbed a jutting root, anchoring them both. "Emily, listen, whatever you did back there, with the light, do it again." "I can't," she cried, tears burning hot trails down her cheeks. "It's gone. I'm too weak." Another voice cut through the night. "You are not weak. You are afraid." It wasn't the giant creature. It wasn't any of the smaller ones. It was something else, something inside her, a whisper rising from the same place the golden light had emerged. Emily gasped, A memory flashed before her eyes, her childhood terror, the loneliness, the cold, the way she whispered into the darkness for someone to stay with her. But beneath that fear, another feeling pulsed, a yearning, a raw, desperate will to survive, to live, to escape. Her hand tingled, the glow sparked once, then faded. The creature lifted its enormous arm, a tidal wave of shadow surging toward them. The smaller creatures gathered below like an audience waiting for the final act. Daniel's voice cracked. Emily now. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. Please, please, light, come back. Please. Something warm flickered in her chest, like a heartbeat. A single golden pulse spread through her ribs, down her arms, to her fingers, and ignited. Emily's eyes flew open. Golden light exploded from her palms, stronger than before, blinding, fierce. Alive, the colossal creature recoiled, its massive grin flickering like a corrupted screen. Its entire shadowy form stuttered, glitching in and out of existence as the light engulfed its tendril. Emily screamed as the light surged forward, roaring like a sun flare. The slab of earth cracked from the force. Daniel held her tightly as the ground under them split, breaking in half. The two of them tumbled downward, free-falling toward the forest below as the golden blast continued upward, slicing through the towering creature's arm. The creature howled, its voice shaking the entire mountain. The light struck its grin, and half of its face tore away like smoke. Emily and Daniel plummeted through branches that snapped like bones around them. The world blurred in a barrage of leaves, splintering wood, and choking wind. They hit the forest floor hard. The impact knocked the breath from Emily's lungs. For a moment she lay stunned, her ears ringing, her vision spinning. Daniel groaned beside her. Are you okay? Emily forced herself upright. Above them, the giant shadow staggered, its massive form convulsing as chunks of darkness peeled away like burning cloth. But it did not fall. It did not die. It lowered its remaining arm slowly, shaking with rage, and its grin reformed. Bigger, brighter, sharper than before. Emily's breath hitched. Daniel whispered, voice cracking, Emily, you heard it, but you didn't kill it. Emily stared at the creature as golden sparks flickered weakly from her fingers. No, she breathed. But now we know. Daniel swallowed hard. Know what? Emily clenched her fists. That it's not unstoppable. The giant shadow bent forward, its enormous grin widening into a monstrous crescent that split the forest with blinding light, and it began to descend straight toward them. The ground quaked beneath Emily and Daniel as the colossal shadow creature descended from above, its grin cutting through the forest canopy like a blade of white fire. The trees bent violently outward, trembling under the sheer weight of its presence. Every branch, every root, every leaf seemed to recoil from it. Emily grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him to his feet. We have to move now. Daniel staggered upright, still shaking from the fall. Which way? There's only one way, Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Away from that. The creature landed with a soundless impact, the earth compressing beneath it as though gravity obeyed its will alone, its remaining arm massive, serpentine, dripping with living darkness, dragged across the ground, carving deep trenches in the soil. The three smaller entities gathered behind it, like obedient shadows, their grins flickering in anticipation. The giant leaned forward, and its voice cracked through the forest like a thunderclap muffled by fog. "You cannot run. You cannot hide. The light inside you is ours." Emily felt her bones vibrate. Daniel clutched her hand tighter. "We need higher ground," he said, breathless. "If we get to the ridge, maybe." A tendril whipped forward. Emily and Daniel dove apart as the shadow arm tore through the ground between them, exploding soil and roots into the air. The force sent Emily tumbling across the forest floor, crashing into a fallen log. Pain radiated through her spine, but she forced herself to crawl upright. "Daniel," she shouted. He was pinned. A shadow tendril had shot through the earth like a spear, trapping his leg beneath twisted roots now hardened into black, stone-like tendrils. Daniel clawed at them, trying to free himself. "Emily," he gasped. I can't move." Another tendril slithered across the ground toward him. Emily sprinted across the clearing. The massive creature shifted, its enormous grin turning toward her like a spotlight made of bone-white hunger. She raised her hand. The glow flickered weakly, barely a spark. "No. Come on. Come on," she whispered, her voice cracking. The golden light sputtered again, then failed. The giant shadow's grin widened. Emily's heart dropped. "No. No." The tendril shot upward, ready to strike Daniel. Emily didn't think. She threw herself across the ground, sliding between Daniel and the tendril just as it stabbed downward. The impact would have ripped through her, but the light erupted, not from her hands, from her entire body. A shockwave of golden fire exploded outward, a sphere of radiant energy that blasted the tendril backward in a burst of ash. The smaller creatures shrieked as they were flung through the trees like torn scraps of cloth. The giant staggered again, its grin flickering, its form glitching violently, as though the light disrupted its existence itself. Emily collapsed to her knees, panting. Daniel, are you okay?" He nodded shakily. I'm okay." "Emily, that light, I don't know how long I can keep doing it," she said, trembling. It's like it's draining me." Daniel reached for her hand. "Then we save it for when it matters." The giant creature roared. The forest trembled. The world dimmed. It surged forward, darkness rolling off its body in tidal waves. The smaller entities regrouped behind it, their grins stuttering rapidly like malfunctioning lights trying to remain lit. Emily stood despite her shaking legs. "No more running," she whispered. Daniel grabbed her arm. Terrified, "Emily, what are you doing?" She stared at the towering silhouette, her pulse pounding in her ears. "I'm done being afraid." She stepped forward. The giant creature's tendrils whipped through the air, preparing to strike with annihilating force. But Emily raised her glowing hands and screamed. Light detonated from her like a star exploding. Daniel shielded his face as the forest was swallowed in a blinding wave of gold. The giant creature reeled backward, tendrils thrashing, its enormous grin shattering like cracked glass. The smaller creatures disintegrated instantly, bursting into dark mist that evaporated in the brilliance. Emily screamed again, pushing the light harder, brighter, pouring every last drop of herself into the blast. Her knees buckled, her vision blurred, her heartbeat slowed. The giant creature let out a guttural, reality-tearing howl as half of its torso peeled away, disintegrating into drifting white embers. The forest shook like a dying world. Emily collapsed. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her into his arms. "Emily, wake up, stay with me. Emily." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Did we stop it? Daniel looked up. The giant shadow was still standing, half destroyed, warped, diminished, but alive. Its grin flickered back into existence, ragged, broken, but still burning. Daniel whispered in horror, "Emily, it's not done." The creature leaned forward and whispered with a voice that rattled the mountain, "You are almost out of light, and when it dies, you are mine." The forest felt lopsided, as if reality itself were tilting under the weight of the creature's half-regenerated form. Emily clung to Daniel, her breath shallow, her body trembling from the overwhelming surge of light she had released. Her vision shook violently, trees bending, shadows splintering, the night sky rippling like a disturbed reflection. Daniel held her close. "Emily, you're burning up." She shook her head weakly. "I'm fine." She wasn't. Her body felt hollow, drained, as though every burst of golden light tore pieces from her to survive. The giant creature straightened itself, its towering silhouette shuddering with glitch-like spasms. Its enormous grin reformed, jagged and fractured, flickering with savage hunger. The remaining half of its body pulsed like a living storm cloud, swirling with darkness that kept collapsing inward, then rebuilding. The smaller creatures were gone, disintegrated, but the giant was adapting, learning, and it wanted her more than ever. The grin brightened. "Your light is fading. Emily, let it go. Let us end this." Daniel pulled her behind a fallen tree as a massive tendril slammed into the ground, splitting the earth open like wet clay. The impact threw leaves and debris into the air, raining down around them. "Emily, we have to move," he whispered urgently. "Can you stand?" Emily tried to rise, but her legs buckled instantly. She caught herself with trembling arms. Daniel helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. Okay, lean on me. We're getting out of here." But the giant creature stepped forward. The ground dimmed beneath its shadow. Trees bowed. The air pressed down on them like invisible hands. Emily felt her knees weaken even more, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward with Daniel. Each step felt like walking through deep water, heavy, suffocating, slow. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice thin. "If I lose the light, it'll take me." "Then don't lose it," he said, voice cracking with desperation. "Stay with me. Stay awake." She nodded, but her vision blurred. The golden glow flickered faintly under her skin, like something fighting to stay alive. The creature lifted both of its arms. A storm of shadow tendrils erupted outward in every direction, swarming through the forest. tearing through trees, ripping roots from the earth. The forest screamed with the sound of wood splintering. Daniel pushed Emily behind a massive boulder. As the tendrils lashed across the clearing, stone cracked, dirt flew. Emily felt the air whip past her face. But then, one tendril found them. It curled around the boulder like a living serpent, splitting it apart with a wet, cracking sound. The two halves fell away, exposing Emily and Daniel. "Run!" Daniel yelled, grabbing her hand. They sprinted across the forest floor, or Daniel sprinted while dragging Emily, her feet barely catching the ground beneath her. She stumbled repeatedly, dizzy, struggling to stay conscious. The creature leaned forward. Its grin widened, and suddenly everything went silent. The wind, the forest, the tendrils, everything. Daniel froze. Emily felt her skin crawl as the silence deepened, thick enough to choke on. She lifted her head slowly. The giant shadow was no longer rushing at them. It was waiting, standing motionless in the center of the clearing, its massive grin glowing in a perfect stillness, as if anticipating something, as if listening. Emily's heart hammered painfully. The golden glow pulsed inside her chest, small, faint, flickering, weak, on the breath of wind that wasn't there. She heard it. "Your light is dying, Emily. And when it does, you return to us." "No," she whispered, clutching Daniel's sleeve. "No, I'm not going back, Daniel lifted her chin with trembling fingers. "Look at me. You're not dying. You're not going anywhere. We're getting out." His voice cut off. A tendril silent as a shadow wrapped around his waist and lifted him into the air. "Daniel!" Emily screamed. He clawed at the tendril, kicking violently. "Emily, run!" But Emily could barely stand. She took one step forward, then another. Her legs shook violently, her body ready to collapse at any moment. "Let him go," she whispered. The giant shadow turned its split grin toward her, bending low. "You have no strength left. You cannot fight us anymore." Emily felt a wave of crushing despair. Tears streamed down her face. Daniel choked against the tendril. Please, go." "No," she screamed. "Stop." But the giant creature only leaned closer, engulfing her in its shadow. "One more burst, and your light extinguishes forever, and you will fall with us into the endless dark." Her heart pounded, her breaths came in sharp gasps. The golden glow inside her chest flickered, dimmer, dimmer, then nearly gone. Daniel screamed as the tendril tightened around him. Emily reached out weakly. "Please, don't take him. Take me instead." The giant creature's grin widened in triumph. Daniel screamed, "No, Emily, don't." The golden spark inside her pulse fluttered and died. Emily fell to her knees, her vision dimmed. The forest darkened even further. The giant creature whispered through the collapsing night, "Now, you are ours." Emily fell forward, her palms hitting the cold earth as her final spark of golden light vanished from her chest. The darkness around her thickened instantly, swooping in like a predator finally cornering its wounded prey. Every sound collapsed into silence. Her breaths turned shallow, trembling, fragile. Daniel's scream felt far away, echoing through a void she no longer had the strength to cross. "Emily, Emily, get up!" please, but she couldn't. Her limbs felt distant, hollow. Her vision pulsed black at the edges, shrinking with every heartbeat. Above her, the colossal shadow creature leaned down, its monstrous grin splitting impossibly wide, bright enough to blind, sharp enough to cut the world open. Its remaining arm extended slowly, fingers like spires of darkness reaching for her. At last, you return to us. Emily lifted her head weakly. The air turned to ice in her lungs. Daniel fought against the tendril crushing his ribs. Desperate, wild, terrified. Let her go. Take me. Just let her go. The giant creature didn't even look at him. Its shadow engulfed Emily completely. Fear called us. Loneliness shaped us. Your voice awakened us. And now, you belong in the dark again. Emily closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. I'm sorry, Daniel, she whispered. Daniel's scream broke in half. No, Emily, don't you dare. The giant shadow reached for her chest where the golden light once lived. It pressed 2 fingers of darkness against her sternum. Emily gasped in agony. The ground shook violently as a deep, resonant hum filled the forest like a monstrous heartbeat. The giant creature began pulling. Dark energy ripped at her chest, searching, clawing, trying to extract the last remnants of the light it believed belonged to it. Emily's scream tore through the clearing. Daniel thrashed against the tendril holding him, breaking skin, breaking bone, but nothing loosened its grip. Let her go, he shouted with a voice full of fury and despair. But the giant creature only leaned closer. She was ours then. She is ours now. She will always be ours. The forest bowed beneath its words. Emily's vision turned white. Her heart stuttered. Something inside her cracked open, and a memory surfaced. Not fear, not loneliness, not darkness. Her father's voice. Emily, the world is full of shadows, but you were born from light. Never forget that. Her breathing steadied. Another memory. Daniel, age 12, holding her hand after a nightmare. If the darkness comes again, I'll be there. I won't let it take you. Warmth flickered low in her ribs. Not bright, not strong, but real. Her eyes snapped open, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt anger. Her fingers twitched. The warmth grew. Daniel saw it first. Emily, Emily. Look. Light, a faint glimmer, then a glow, then a pulse of gold bursting beneath her skin like a heartbeat waking from sleep. The giant creature hissed in confusion. Its grip faltered. Emily's voice was barely audible, but certain. I don't belong to you. The warmth surged upward, filling her arms, her chest, her throat, her skull pouring through her like fire made of memory and love and fury. I never did. The explosion of golden light shook the mountain. A shockwave blasted outward, ripping the giant creature backward, as if struck by a hurricane. Its enormous grin shattered, splintering into dozens of glowing shards that dissolved into the air. Daniel was thrown free from the tendril, crashing into the dirt as the shadow creature reeled, its massive body tearing apart in streaks of white and black. Emily rose to her knees, engulfed in light so bright it illuminated the entire forest. turning night into dawn. The creature screamed, a sound that shook the earth, a sound that broke the trees, a sound that died in silence. Its body collapsed inward, folding like a dying star, shrinking, imploding into a single point of darkness, and vanishing. The smaller creatures evaporated instantly, their grins extinguishing like snuffed candles. The forest stilled, the wind breathed, the night fell quiet. Emily collapsed. Daniel crawled to her with shaking limbs. "Emily, Emily, please open your eyes." She did, barely. Tears streaked down his face as he pulled her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered, voice shaking. "You saved us." Emily leaned into him, exhausted but alive. "I didn't do it alone." Daniel laughed through tears. Let's never come back here again." Emily exhaled a trembling breath. "Never." The forest around them creaked softly, but no grins appeared, no shadows stirred, no whispers came. The darkness had lost its claim. Emily had taken it back. She closed her eyes, not in fear, but in peace. The nightmare was finally over, or so she hoped. Far beneath the earth, in a place no light reached, a faint grin flickered, then died.